같고, 연습을 하는데도 불구하고 끝까지 안 되는 음악적인 패시지라든지 테크닉적인 패시지들이 있는데, 그게 무대 위에서 정말 무의식적인 세계에서 갑자기 해결이 되는 경우가 있더라고요. 그랬을 때 이제 희열을 확 느끼는 것 같아요. 제가 지금 공부하고 있는 곡들, 즐겨 연주하고 있는 곡들이 사실 클래식 음악을 처음 접하는 분들에겐 익숙하지 않은 곡들이지만 지금 제 나이에 가장 잘 표현할 수 있는 음악이라고 생각을 해서 그런 레퍼토리를 준비를 하고 있는 거니까 같이 즐겨주시고 같이 공유해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Global heritage will unite. We share brilliant values and honor the world's most cherished legacies to pass our heritage on to future generations. Busan invites you, the 48th session of UNESCO World Heritage Committee, July 2026, Busan, Korea.
In our headlines on this Wednesday, February 25th, here in South Korea, the benchmark KOSPI index sets a fresh milestone today, just 1 month after soaring past the historic 5,000 mark, driven by global demand for memory chips. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump delivers his State of the Union address on Tuesday evening U.S. time, touting trade and tariffs in a record-setting speech that lasted over 1 hour and 47 minutes. Also in the U.S., South Korean Ambassador Kang says Seoul will actively work with Washington to ensure trade talks advance under an amicable atmosphere. South Korea's benchmark KOSPI index soared past the 6,000 mark today, just 1 month after breaking through 5,000. Our correspondent Park Junan covers the new milestone.
The KOSPI made history on Wednesday by surging past 6,100 during the day and closing at a record high above 6,000, capping off a remarkable rally that has captivated investors worldwide. The benchmark index climbed to close at 6,083, driven by robust gains in key sectors amid global optimism in the technology and automotive industries. Leading the charge were heavyweight stocks like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which built on Tuesday's milestones, where Samsung hit 200,000 Korean won and SK Hynix reached 1 million won. The rises were supported by strong demand for semiconductors, fueled by advancements in artificial intelligence and partnerships in the tech space. Adding momentum were automotive giants Hyundai Motor and Kia, which both jumped sharply on expectations of advancements in robotics and autonomous driving. The two companies are shifting beyond car makers to become physical AI companies. As a result, the two surged by 9.16% and 12.7% respectively.
Hyundai Motors' identity changes entirely depending on whether it is viewed as a legacy automaker or a core player in physical AI. Through its recent partnership with NVIDIA, the company has gained confidence that its technological capabilities could advance to a level approaching that of Tesla.
KOSPI's 6,000 comes just over a month after it first crossed 5,000 on January 22nd, marking the fastest 1,000-point gain in its history. The index has soared more than 44% year-to-date, outpacing all major global markets and claiming the world's top return rate. Amid the significant stock rally, concerns do linger about sustainability. The rally's heavy reliance on just a few megacaps like Samsung and SK Hynix raises concerns. But an expert claims that it is the megacap companies that have the money and technology to dominate the market, which is universal in many countries.
When it comes to AI technology, companies without sufficient capital simply cannot get close. Firms that rank within the top 10 by market capitalization are, in a sense, our national champions. For now, the priority is survival. Discussions about sharing the gains can come after they secure their position.
While some domestic and international securities firms have raised year-end targets to as high as over 8,000, short-term volatility triggered by concerns over a tech bubble or external disruptions beyond the Korean market could still challenge the KOSPI's ongoing rally. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., a little over 6 hours ago, President Donald Trump began a record-setting State of the Union address that lasted over 1 hour and 47 minutes. Our Cho Young-eun covers that address.
Kicking off just after 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, Trump opened his speech with a triumphant assessment of his first year back in the White House, declaring this is the golden age of America.
Today, our border is secure. Our spirit is restored. Inflation is plummeting. Incomes are rising fast. The roaring economy is roaring like never before, and our enemies are scared.
Touting his economic record, Trump credited this to his controversial global tariffs, which were struck down by the Supreme Court less than a week earlier. Pointing to stock market gains and new job creation, Trump said his decision to focus on imposing tariffs, despite warnings from many economists, has worked well for the economy.
As thousands of new businesses are forming in factories, plants, and laboratories are being built, we have added 70,000 new construction jobs in just a very short period of time. It's getting bigger and bigger and stronger.
After the Supreme Court delivered a major setback to his agenda by striking down his sweeping tariff, Trump described the ruling as unfortunate. He maintained that alternative legal mechanisms remained available to impose similar tariffs, reiterating his belief that these could eventually replace income tax.
But the good news is that almost all countries and corporations want to keep the deal that they already made.
The president went on to highlight his immigration crackdown and also praised efforts to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. and lower the murder rate. He delivered extended remarks recognizing victims of violent crimes committed by people who were in the U.S. illegally, with several family members in attendance.
We now have the strongest and most secure border in American history by far.
Coming ahead of the country's November midterm elections, Trump also added a surprise element to the evening, awarding medal to service members and inviting the U.S. men's hockey team to the chamber following their Olympic win. 조영은, Arirang News.
Also, during his State of the Union address, Mr. Trump took time to reaffirm his stance against Tehran's nuclear ambitions as his military reinforces its presence in the region surrounding Iran. Our Chung Hye-rim has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump issued a stark warning to Iran during his State of the Union address on Tuesday, the first address of his second term.
My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon.
His remarks come amid a major U.S. military buildup in the region. The military has deployed over 150 aircraft across Europe and the Middle East, following recent nuclear talks with Iran ending without a breakthrough on February 17th. According to flight tracking data and satellite imagery reviewed by the Washington Post on Tuesday, this marks one of the largest U.S. force buildups in the region in more than 2 decades. The deployment includes fighter jets such as F-35s and F-22s, along with refueling tankers, surveillance aircraft, and cargo planes. Tehran is now showcasing its own military power. On Tuesday, Iranian state TV released a video of the Revolutionary Guard conducting coastal drills. The footage shows forces launching missiles, flying drones, and firing at targets, though the exact time and location of the exercises were not disclosed. Despite the tensions, the United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks in Geneva on Thursday. Iran's foreign minister said Tuesday that a deal to avoid military confrontation is, quote, within reach, but warned Tehran would respond firmly to any attack. The talks come at a critical moment as both sides seek diplomacy but weigh national interest as a priority. Meanwhile, oil prices rose amid concerns over the standoff as markets weighed the risk of conflict alongside the possibility of renewed negotiations. 정혜림, Arirang News.
South Korea's top diplomat to the U.S. has reaffirmed Seoul's stance to maintain close consultation with Washington over tariffs and trade, with priority placed on protecting national interests. Our Kim Do-yeon has details.
South Korean ambassador to the United States Kang says Seoul will actively work with Washington to ensure trade discussions proceed in a friendly atmosphere. Speaking to correspondents in Washington on Tuesday local time, Kang addressed the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling that declared reciprocal tariffs illegal and the Trump administration's subsequent move to levy new global tariffs. She emphasized that the embassy is closely monitoring the Trump administration's follow-up measures, including additional tariffs to protect South Korean interests.
We will provide support so that consultations with the U.S. can proceed in an amicable atmosphere. Regarding the refund of reciprocal tariffs already paid, which was not clearly addressed in the ruling, we will ensure accurate information is delivered to our companies in a timely manner.
Meanwhile, observers in Washington suggest the U.S. Trade Representative could launch a Section 301 investigation of Coupang's data breach case and also the Korean government's investigation of the company. That comes as interim Coupang CEO Harold Rogers attended a closed-door House hearing in Washington on Monday. A Section 301 looks for potential foreign trade practices that are deemed unfair, discriminatory, or restrictive to U.S. commerce, which could lead to additional retaliatory tariffs. However, diplomatic sources note that even if a probe begins next month, it requires hearing the Korean government's position. On the security front, Seoul and Washington are continuing discussions on implementing their joint fact sheet, which covers cooperation on nuclear power submarines and nuclear energy. Ambassador Kang affirmed that the embassy will act as a bridge to expedite these agreements, pending the passage of the Special Act on Investment in the U.S. currently in South Korea's National Assembly. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted yet again the importance of encouraging foreign travel beyond Seoul. Do take a listen.
지금처럼 외국인 관광객의 80%가 서울에 집중되는 현실에 만족하면 관광 산업의 성장이 한계에 봉착할 수밖에 없습니다.
Chairing a tourism policy meeting at the Blue House earlier on this Wednesday, he called for the launch of region-specific travel programs and for more visitor-friendly infrastructure and services. The government aims to attract 30 million inbound tourists annually. Now, last year, almost 19 million tourists flocked to South Korea. In other news, the National Assembly on Wednesday approved a motion to end an opposition-led filibuster and then proceeded to pass a revision to the Commercial Act, which will prevent companies from freely stockpiling treasury shares. The People Power Party opposed the amendment and staged an unlimited debate during Tuesday's plenary session. However, the ruling Democratic Party used its parliamentary majority to bring that filibuster to a close today. Following the vote, lawmakers tabled amendments to the Criminal Act that introduced a new crime of legal distortion, bringing the number of bills left on the agenda to 7. With the PPP pledging to launch filibusters against every single one of them, the Parliament is headed for its longest plenary session yet. The number of newborns here in South Korea last year jumped almost 7% on year to raise the country's birth rate to 0.8. Our Ian Jin has the latest findings.
South Korea's birth rate grew at the fastest pace in 15 years in 2025, with the number of babies born tallied at 254,500. That's according to a government report released on Wednesday, which said the figure rose 6.8% from 2024, marking a birth rate increase for the second consecutive year. The country's total fertility rate has also risen to 0.8 for the first time in 4 years. The Ministry of Data and Statistics attributes the rebound to an increase in marriages and the continued rise in the number of women in their early 30s, a figure that has been increasing since 2021. It noted that the number of marriages rose for 21 straight months between April 2024 and December 2025 as couples who had delayed their marriages due to the pandemic got married. The ministry also highlighted that there's been a notable change in social perception towards having children. The number of couples planning to have children after marriage rose by 3.1 percentage points in 2024 in the ministry's latest biannual survey, while there was also an increase in the proportion of people willing to give birth outside of marriage, which increased by 2.5 percentage points. With such data, the government projected the total fertility rate of the country to stay above the 0.8 level this year and to further rise to 1 by 2030. However, this still keeps South Korea's birth rate the lowest among OECD countries. Meanwhile, the number of deaths also went up 1.3% on year in 2025, which means the country saw a natural population decline of 110,000. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Come next month, Seoul and Washington will launch their regular springtime defense drill, and relevant details were disclosed in a joint briefing earlier this afternoon. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
South Korea and the United States will stage their annual joint springtime military exercise, Freedom Shield, from March 9th to 19th. In terms of field training that is usually conducted in a concentrated fashion during this period, the allies said they were still consulting on how the drills would take place this time, but that they will be executed in a balanced fashion. This is reportedly due to South Korea's request to adjust the drills, seemingly to reduce any reaction by North Korea.
They added that the drills serve as a chance to support ongoing preparations for a conditions-based wartime operational transition.
During the exercise, our militaries will carry out a joint assessment to test if the future CFC can fully operate as part of transferring wartime control within the current administration.
The press release for the exercise did not specifically say it would involve scenarios featuring direct North Korean threats. Rather, it said the drills will focus on deterring the regime's nuclear threats.
The exercise will focus on deterring DPRK's WMDs, which are including nuclear weapons. The Mutual Defense Treaty does not name an adversary. We're here to ensure that both Iraq and U.S. can defend the Republic of Korea against any adversary.
Several UN Command member states are to contribute to the exercise, and the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission will observe the drills to monitor compliance with the armistice agreement. 김보경, Arirang News.
And the commander of U.S. Forces Korea has voiced regret that Defense Minister An Gyu-baek was not briefed in time on its recent air drills over the West Sea. In a statement Tuesday, General Xavier Brunson said he spoke with Minister An to clarify that notification was provided at a working level, but regretted that the minister and the JCS chairman were not briefed in time. Now, this follows a rash standoff last week when Chinese fighter jets were dispatched in response to some 10 USFK F-16s flying between the air defense identification zones of South Korea and China. Following a complaint from Seoul about the lack of advance notification, the U.S. military ended the exercise on Thursday, 2 days earlier than planned. This week also marks the world's 4 years, that is, since Russia attacked Ukraine, and despite efforts to end the former's aggression, Moscow appears intent on maintaining its military campaign. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
4 years after launching its invasion of Ukraine, Russia said Tuesday that it will continue fighting until it fully achieves its objectives. Moscow maintains it's open to a peaceful resolution, but insists any progress depends entirely on Kyiv's actions. The Kremlin is again demanding that Ukraine give up the Donbas region, making clear there will be no compromise on territorial issues. President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of obstructing peace negotiations and warned there would be consequences for any nuclear strike against Russia. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky pushed back, saying Ukraine has defended its independence for 4 years and that Putin has failed to win the war. He also urged Europe to step up pressure on Russia. At the same time, Russian intelligence has claimed that the United Kingdom and France are planning to send nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Russia's foreign intelligence agency, the SVR, alleged that London and Paris are preparing to arm Kyiv with a nuclear bomb in what it called a blatant violation of international law. The claims were amplified by Russian state media, but provided no evidence to support them. Ukraine has also strongly rejected Moscow's accusations. European leaders marked the anniversary in Kyiv, vowing not to abandon Ukraine as the war entered its 5th year. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined the talks by video link, saying allies must do the hard work of supporting Ukraine and increasing pressure on Moscow. The UK also announced its largest round of sanctions since the early months of the war, targeting nearly 300 Russian entities, including oil pipeline giant Transneft. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Record-breaking rains in southeastern Brazil have led to 25 deaths in a single day. Officials confirmed the death toll on Tuesday after torrential downpours triggered massive landslides and flooding. The disaster hit the city of Juiz de Fora hardest, where rescuers are currently searching for 43 missing people. The Brazilian government declared a state of calamity as rainfall levels reached double the monthly average for February. More than 140 firefighters have been deployed to lead humanitarian relief and reconstruction efforts. In the United States, NBC Today show host Savannah Guthrie is offering a $1 million reward to find her 84-year-old mother, Nancy, who vanished 3 weeks ago. The FBI and Arizona police suspect a kidnapper snatched Nancy Guthrie from her Tucson home on January 31st. Surveillance footage showed a masked man outside the residence on the night she vanished, and authorities said drops of her blood were found on the front porch. Savannah Guthrie issued a desperate plea Tuesday, stating her family needs closure regardless of the outcome. Alongside the reward, the family is donating $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to support other families in crisis. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum on Tuesday guaranteed total safety for the 2026 FIFA World Cup despite a surge in cartel violence. The capture and death of top cartel leader El Mencho recently sparked arson attacks and roadblocks across Jalisco state, forcing local soccer leagues to postpone matches. FIFA said it is closely monitoring the situation. New roadblocks appeared overnight, but President Sheinbaum said the situation is getting back to normal and security forces are working to safeguard public safety. Mexico is set to host 13 of 104 World Cup matches, with the tournament opening on June 11th. French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday accepted the resignation of Louvre Museum director Laurence Descartes following a massive security failure. The world's most visited museum has faced intense scrutiny since October, when thieves stole jewels worth $102 million. Critics, including the state auditor's office, have questioned security and infrastructure spending. The museum has also recently had water leaks and strikes over pay. President Macron praised the resignation as an act of responsibility necessary to modernize security and restore calm and new momentum to the Paris landmark. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Here in the capital area, we had a picture-perfect weather this afternoon under clear blue skies with clean air. Hope you had a chance to enjoy it. Temperatures were pushed more than a month ahead of schedule, and tomorrow looks to be a repeat of today with more clouds moving in. But the morning starts off on a chilly note at 2 degrees in the capital, 3 degrees in Gwangju. However, highs will jump more than 10 degrees by the afternoon. Seoul and Gwangju will be getting up to 15 degrees Celsius, Busan getting up to 14 degrees, and southern regions will continue to have cloudy skies, but air quality will remain good nationwide. Spring-like warmth continues through the long weekend, while Jeju Island will see more wet weather for the time being. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions. Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
Curious about Korea?
And especially K-food.
how familiar are you with Korean food? The sea on three sides, a mountainous terrain, and 4 distinct seasons. Thanks to these conditions, Korean cuisine bursts with diverse and unique flavors.
Do you prefer sweet or spicy?
A meat lover or a seafood connoisseur?
Can't decide?
There's got to be something here that you like.
For Koreans, rice is foundational. It's a staple and the centerpiece to all meals in Korea. There's bibimbap, rice mixed with vegetables, gukbap, rice in hot soup, and kimbap is the demand around the world.
For me, it's noodles over rice. Korea has amazing noodle dishes. Chuy ramen and cold naengmyeon to blow away the heat. A meat lover here, pork, beef, chicken, I like them all. Did you know that bulgogi is listed in the English dictionary? There's also the famous chimek, chicken and beer, which is the best combo for a night out with friends.
Surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, Korea has a great selection of seafood, from raw fish to piping hot seafood soups. It's mouth-watering just talking about it. The 2 pillars of Korean condiments, gochujang and soy sauce.
Ooh, what do you prefer?
Gochujang. I like anything made with gochujang. In general, Koreans love spicy food.
I prefer the soy sauce base. There's something about the salty and sweet that hits the right spot. I think even those who are trying Korean food for the first time will really like it.
But that's not all.
We can't leave out the street food. If you're in Korea, it's a must try. They are both treats for your eyes and mouth.
How about it? Mouth-watering, right?
Korean food, you've got to try it. Discover a whole new world of flavors.
On Press Perspective today, we touch upon the State of the Union address by U.S. leader Donald Trump amid his threat against American trade partners to abide by their deals with him, despite the Supreme Court ruling that essentially removes the legal foundation for most of his tariffs. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Wednesday, February 25th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. A little over 6 hours ago, Mr. Trump began, that is, a record-setting State of the Union address that lasted over 1 hour and 47 minutes. For more on that address and US tariffs, I have Celia Fioretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celia, as always, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
I also have Professor Song Soo-young at Chungang University joining our talk virtually. Professor Song, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
We shall start here in the studio. Celia, let's begin then with a recap of Mr. Trump's State of the Union address and its implications.
President Trump's State of the Union address was, above all, a political reset moment, just hours after the Supreme Court struck down most of his tariff, as you mentioned, including those affecting partners like South Korea. He chose not to sound defensive. Instead, he went on the offense. He presented what he called like a booming America, a golden age for the United States. According to Trump, the economy is roaring, low gas prices, strong market, easing costs. He insisted that everybody is up, but that optimism collides with what polls have been showing in the US, which shows more anxiety about inflation and economic direction of the country. So there's a risk that this upbeat discourse might come in conflict with what the Americans are actually feeling, especially in the upcoming election this year. On tariff, also, he doubled down even after the court's ruling. He claimed that tariff revenues are saving the country. Economists obviously strongly dispute that and arguing that the costs are largely borne by the US consumer and not the foreign companies. So legally and economically, this issue is far from settled with the Supreme Court ruling, and we can expect further executive action from Donald Trump. He already mentioned that last week. And the speech was also highly nationalistic. He wraps himself in patriotism. So, of course, he congratulated the Olympic athletes from the Italian Winter Olympics. But he also emphasized border enforcement, which is a strong policy of Donald Trump, claiming a record low illegal entry in the US. And at the same time, we could see in the room the political divide in the US feels very present with outside of the Capitol Democratic protest, even inside some members of the opposition shaking their heads at what Trump was saying. So you can see all the tension in the room right now. And overall, this address was less about reconciliation of the US, but more consolidating his power and attacking the opposition and really projecting his strengths and power to the American people.
Right. Professor Song, keeping global trade in mind, what were your takeaways from Mr. Trump's address?
Actually, in his address, he did not mention about some international trade issues directly because he make use of this opportunity to advance his agendas about the exactly midterm voting, which will be held in November. But as for the international trade, recently the development of the trading partners who has been imposed by the huge tariffs, but they have a little bit changed their posture against the United States. That's I got that India has recently postponed some delegation of the members to negotiate the trade conditions between US and India. And China has also requested that do not use the tariff as a weapon of the political weapon. That is always harmful to the both countries and as well as the other countries. And also several other countries has, particularly the EU, they have delayed the ratification of the investment in the US as well as each country's trade deal with the United States. Of course, Trump and administration would like to intimidate the other partner to abide by the rules which was imposed or negotiated for the past several months. And then he do not exploit the opportunity of the Supreme Court decision against the Trump administration because he argues that he has some other weapons such as Section 122 or Section 301, which could be used. But still, those steps are also required to have some approval and by the Congress. So I think there is a bumpy road in front of Donald Trump. So that implies that the international trade environment looks a little bit very positive. I think that's my hope and also my opinion about the prospect of South Korean trade.
Right, and speaking about the bumpy road ahead, Trump, as mentioned by Professor Song-Silyo, Mr. Trump, he has in fact told American trade partners not to, and I quote, play games with U.S. trade deals. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Indeed, in the days coming up to the State of the Union address, Donald Trump struck a pretty combative tone in a series of social media posts on Truth Social. He warned that any country attempting to play games with recently negotiated U.S. deals would face significantly higher tariff, even beyond what was already been agreed on. And this comes after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled out his emergency tariff as illegal and imposed these tariffs that have been imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act were deemed illegal by the Supreme Court. And rather than backing down, Trump argued that the ruling actually strengthened his hand. He said that the court affirmed his ability to use other trade laws, and in his words, in a much more powerful and obnoxious way, to reimpose duties with greater legal certainty now. And he specifically pointed to Section 122 and 301 that will allow to enforce bigger tariff on specific sectors of the economy to specific countries. And the direction was globally sort of uncertain. The European Parliament, for example, postponed its vote on the trade deal with Washington. China has urged the US to scrap any tariff measure. India delayed planned talks, and markets reacted nervously to that. And the Dow fell more than 1.6%, and the dollar also weakened consecutively to the announcement. So the key message of Trump over the past day and during this address is that even if one legal pathway is blocked by the court, he will find another way to pursue his economic policy and his idea of how trade should be regulated in the world.
All right, and before we proceed any further, Celia, perhaps we could take this moment to go over a few jargons that you mentioned, that was mentioned earlier by Professor Song as well. Could you tell us a bit about these words, Section 122 and Section 301? And also, of course, let's start off then with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that was ruled, that the Supreme Court ruled against. Let's start with that. It's also called AIPA, right?
Right.
So let's start off with AIPA and then Section 122 and then Section 301.
As I think we can see, it's very complicated to figure out what exactly those means. And there's been a lot of legal jargon flying around, Section 122, Section 301. And so we'll try to break it down in simple terms, starting with the IEEPA, the law the Supreme Court just struck down as a tariff tool. So it's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, and is designated to give the president broad authority on during a national emergency to adjust economic policy, typically involving a foreign threat. President Trump has been using it to impose new tariffs without clear limit on their size or duration, and the Supreme Court ruled that this is an illegal use of the IEEPA. Now, that doesn't mean he's out of option. One alternative section is Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act, and this allows U.S. trade representatives to investigate countries for unfair practices. And this is what Trump has already been saying all over the place, that some countries are doing unfair treatment of the U.S., imposing tariff, even if they are not. And so this wrongdoing that Trump could declare would allow him to impose tariff. For example, he used already Section 301 on China during his first term to impose tariff on Beijing. But the catch is that it requires a formal investigation, which can take months. It's not immediate. So we will not see a hike in tariffs suddenly, but it will take a few months until the case is ready for that. And there's also the Section 122, which allowed temporary tariff to be levied on other countries, but it's limited. Tariff cannot exceed 15% and can only last 150 days unless there's a Congress approve the extension. So it's tricky, but there's a new path that Trump could use to impose tariff.
Right, quite a lot of jargons there. Right. Professor Song, how does the court's ruling and President Trump's retaliation look to affect South Korea?
As Trump threatened the other countries to abide by the existing tariff imposed on them, but clearly this is what is important for South Korea is not to deliver impression that we exploit this opportunity, but actually I would like to exploit this opportunity through the importers in the United States, which means the ruling against Trump administration clearly opened the way for the importers, particularly the Chinese products or South Korean products, whatever, the importers who has paid the tariff already. Therefore, it means that this Supreme Court ruling means these importers in the United States, they could start some litigation against Trump administration. This would take a very long time. During that time, as the situation has been developed, and then when some litigation is played out, we are relatively remain a little bit irrelevant or some kind of solemn, but we could enjoy the moment. And also, I urge the Korean companies and investors, they urge those to make investment not in the United States, but in Korea or other countries. That would be better choice for them, and to enjoy the moment. This turns to be a very favorable to our economic prospect.
All right, and speaking about South Korea, Silio, what has been the latest efforts by the government here to respond to the latest ruling by the Supreme Court and the actions taken by the Trump administration in response?
Well, the Lee Jae-myung administration has been taking quite a cautious, calibrated response to it. At first glance, the ruling might seem good news from Korea, the Supreme Court ruling, because it invalidated the tariff that Trump tried to impose. But Seoul is not celebrating. The concern is that the uncertainty is far from lower, actually. Almost immediately after the ruling, Trump signed an executive order invoking Section 122, as we mentioned before, to impose a 10% global tariff, with plans to raise it to 15%. He also signaled other paths to impose tariff. So that means Korea is not out of the target for now, especially because some of the sections, Section 301, for example, specifically mention steel and automobile, for example, which is Korea's main export to the U.S. For now. So in response, Deputy Prime Minister Koo Yoon-chol convened an emergency meeting to assess sector-specific risk and financial market impacts of a possible return of the tariff. And the Trade Ministry also held internal strategy talks for public-private joint meetings with business leaders to evaluate industry exposure and basically to prepare a strategy to any eventuality that Trump will come to Korea with new tariff. And the government core priority is to preserve the balance secured under the Korea-US tariff agreement, which was hard to get because it lasted 4 months. And there was also even uncertainty a few months ago. So now they're trying to secure the deal, consolidate what they have, and make sure if there's any other threats coming by Trump, they will be able to make a quick response and adaptable response to any possible new hike in tariff.
Right. Professor Song, in the meantime, the South Korean stock market, it appears largely undaunted by the fallout over U.S. tariffs. In fact, today, the benchmark KOSPI index soared past the 6,000 mark for the first time. How do you explain this reality?
I almost feel some kind of dizziness and almost looks like a vertigo to me. But a year ago, I have mentioned maybe this in broadcasting in Arirang TV. I have mentioned 5,000 could be set up as a kind of a goal, not to be actually to realize, but current development of international trade situation is turns out to be relatively very favorable to us, particularly for example, the broadly imposed tariff. As long as they are the same for all the countries, it does not. Tariff itself cannot affect the economic performance of South Korea because Northeast and the North Asian countries, their strength is based upon some kind of advanced technology, semiconductor and the AI-related issues. Therefore, the capital flow into East and North Asia is very consistent and sustainable. But whereas in Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam and Thailand, Malaysia is largely dependent upon trade itself. Therefore, they are subject to some kind of fluctuation and uncertainty matters. But at least for South Korea, the capital flow will continue. That is the primary reason why we have seen that the robust growth of the KOSPI index and the Korean stock market is like 20% from 5,000 in terms of KOSPI index. 5,000 has been surpassed in the last month. Just in a month, almost 20% of increase, which could be amounted to almost 240% increase. This is a really dizzy situation, but currently, I do not have much concern about this turns out to be a bubble, but whereas I can see the Hyundai Motors investment in Korea, particularly the Western Sea side in Saemangeum areas and other companies such as Merge on the petrochemicals, Lotte and the Hyundai, that could cast a very prospective and a very positive view, not for the domestic industry as well as international situation is not as bad as it used to be. And in comparison with other European unions, other potential competitors such as Japan or others, South Korea's current situation is relatively very in good situation.
Right, and speaking about the country as a whole, Professor Song, if you are asked to offer some advice with regard to South Korea's future course of action amid this current climate of geopolitical trade uncertainty, what would you say?
I would like to say that recent state visit by Brazilian President Lula has been a really good signal, and South America and Brazil and the market could be another portfolio that could be used as a balance to balance our economies with regard to the international trade. And also good news is domestic investment by the companies because they are fully aware of the potential perils and the dangers when they made a huge investment in a foreign country. That could be seriously influenced, affected when the political situation has become exacerbated. And as for the political and the geopolitical issues, as long as it turns out to be a very big threat, then we should focus on the domestic investment and some balanced position in the international trade. To that regard, United States and Canada, and also Brazil and South America, and also Russia and Europe and China. Then this means really I have always emphasized and argued that South Korea should maintain some balanced position. Now I think at this time it is achieved.
Right, balancing a pragmatic approach to trade then. All right, Professor Song, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
And here in the studio, Celia, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, on that note, we say goodbye. We thank you for watching and do join us again same time tomorrow.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1.